Okay, so round two, I'm paired against I am Josiah Stearman, who is a couple years older than Eric, but definitely on the younger side. I think he's like maybe 18 or 19. And a really sharp young player. We actually played once before, I think in, I don't know if it was classical or it was like a G60 or something, but he actually beat me in that game, even though I was, I think, like significantly higher rated back then. So definitely was approaching this game, yeah, very seriously as well. Unfortunately for me, I ended up getting the first two rounds as black in this tournament, which is not usually ideal. You kind of want to start off, you know, with white and comfortable, but okay, I had two blacks in a row. And yeah, as you can imagine, like that first game, you know, the King's Indian, like I definitely had to check the opening, right, to make sure like if Josiah like repeats it or, you know, plays something similar, I'm gonna have some improvement ready. And I think I knew the line I was gonna get, or at least I was well prepped for this one. Because he ends up playing bishop e2 and bishop e3. And this line has been very popular lately, and I think my opponent has played this one a couple times, so I was definitely expecting it. And ended up going for one of the main lines here, which is e5 and knight a6. There's lots of different ways for black to play this position. The main thing to understand is that white is just, with this move order, leaving the knight on g1, mainly gunning for kingside play with g4, h4, h5, g5, and so on. And the two bishops kind of support that very nicely. So black definitely has to fight for counterplay, like right out of the opening. There's different ways to do that, but I end up going with this plan, which I think is pretty trendy these days. Here he plays h4, which is one of the main moves. g4 also very possible here. I think other moves as well, but yeah, h4 and g4 are basically the two main moves as far as I understand. White can also play knight f3 and transpose to like a normal position, but usually this is not the idea behind this this move order. So h4, knight c5, queen c2, c6, h5, takes, queen a5. We actually end up following, I think, a number of high-level games here. The idea behind this move, queen a5, is to take this pawn on e4. And so if white defends the pawn with f3, then okay, I'm taking on h5, and I don't think white really gets enough here. So white throws in h6, very important, bishop h8, now f3, and knight h5. And this is a very computer-y line. Sorry. But
hello.
Hey.
Hi. I'm doing my taxes. Sorry for being grumpy.
That's okay. Let's go back. Why not bishop d2 instead of h6? Let's see. I'm sure that's a move. Yeah, good question. I don't know. I didn't really prepare this one, so I'd have to start thinking on my own here. But this definitely makes sense. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not really sure how black would continue here, but there's probably games in this position. Yeah, about the computer liking h4, right? Definitely a lot of openings have seen some early h4s and g4s. Been a real revival. And usually the idea is often either to open the h file or to just play h6 and really kind of cramp black and shut down this this bishop on g7. So we end up getting h6, bishop h8, f3, knight h5. And yeah, the idea is now we're trying to play for knight to g3. And now white goes a3. And yeah, I think we're still following book here for the next couple moves. So a3 trying to play b4. Question, can white go for g4 and h4 in these lines compared to early knight f3 lines? Yeah, that's exactly the point of this system, of playing bishop e2, bishop e3, is to play for early g4 and h4. Yeah. So the line continues, a3. Well, the question was, why can white go for g4? Yeah, because the bishops are covering the g4 square. Specifically, this one is covering the g4 square. So and white can actually play g4, because otherwise the pawn would just be hanging. So knight g3, rook h2, and this knight is not really going anywhere. I'm just going to trade it off for the bishop eventually. I take. Here white goes b4. So it kind of actually very, very interesting moment here. During the game, I was pretty sure on knight g3, white is supposed to go b4 first. And then black goes queen d8, then white plays rook h2, I take on e2, knight takes e2, this knight is hanging, I gotta go back, knight a6, white probably goes g4 here, and then I actually had this position analyzed like even a little bit further, because it's very scary. I mean, honestly, it's not a structure I'm used to playing, where I'm just fully cramped with this h6 pawn, and then white wants to possibly go g5, or possibly go f4, possibly push on the queen side. Black is really giving up a lot of space, but even though the engine is like super optimistic about white's chances here at first, if you look at the games, actually, black is doing fine. And as you kind of play out like natural moves here for black, the evaluation kind of goes like lower and lower. So it's really actually, I think, a very, very interesting position for both sides. So we end up getting this position in the game by transposition, because here white goes rook h2 first, I take on e2, and now he throws in b4. And I realized, okay, there's a difference here, because I have this extra move, queen a6, which looks would look tempting, right, to go after this d3 square. And so queen a6, white has to recapture this knight, and then I get knight d3 check, king d2, and then, well, I probably have to go knight f4. And maybe we're sacrificing this pawn, but this is not a pawn sack that we're unhappy with, right? Because if white takes this knight and opens up the diagonal, king is on d2, we get bishop d7 in, rook c8, like white is just going to be busted. So I don't even think white can consider taking on f4 here. So I was looking at this position, I mean, to me it looked totally fine and very, very interesting to play. And maybe I should have gone for it, but honestly, I just wanted to transpose to the position that, like, I knew. Like, because for me, it was just like, okay, this position, you know, might be interesting. Maybe it's good for black. Maybe it's not. There's a slight chance that, you know, I'm missing something and it's not working. But I felt like, okay, if I just play queen d8 here, which I end up doing, then he's going to take knight a6, g4. We transpose back into the prep. It's the position I prepared. It's the position that he probably prepared. You know, we're both like interested in playing the position. You know, why do I have to like try to like exploit his move order and do something different? I decide, you know, let's just like get back to the prep. So long story short, we end up getting this position, and yeah, objectively, like, okay, I should have, I think, played the move queen a6 here. I think it's just a stronger move, but like selfishly, like I just wanted to play the position that I prepared. Like I just thought it would be better for like my overall understanding of the position. I don't know if it was the right choice. Would I have done the same thing if white had like totally blundered? No, I probably would just take the blunder, take the win, and go home. But anyway, so my reasoning was like, well, if he had just played the right move order anyway, then we would reach this position, and I would be happy to play this position. So whatever, let's just play this position. So we get here. I go bishop f6. I think bishop d7 is more precise to stop the knight from coming into b5, but it doesn't matter too much. Bishop f6, queen d2 is played, bishop d7, king f2, bishop e7. And what I like about this position, I mean, it looks very, very cramped for black, but the thing is, it's like not exactly long-term safe for white either. The pawn on h6 means my king is possibly weak, but also means the king side is closed. So it's not like white is just opening the h-file, right, and mating me. That's not happening. And in the future, I'm always going to have ideas of rook c8, knight c7, a5, knight b5. There's always going to be queenside counterplay, maybe ideas of f5, like followed by like king h8 and just opening up the king side at an opportune moment. And yeah, like practically speaking, I think actually black's results in this kind of structure have been quite nice. Because white's king on f2 is just like not super safe in the long run. Unfortunately, I end up like just like totally misplaying this position. So he goes rook h1. Basically just like connecting rooks this way so that this rook can always kind of access the queen side if needed. And yeah, it's just kind of, I think, good strategic chess in general. I played king h8. I think the engine was suggesting knight c7 is probably stronger. Maybe this move king h8 is not needed here. I still need to like really analyze this game, I think, a lot deeper. But the main point is that black is just trying to fight for very quick counterplay here with a5 and f5 as well. So if white plays something like a4 here, then now maybe black goes f5, and yeah, I mean, chances look extremely double-edged here. But I go king h8, rook g1, knight c7, and here white plays f4. And yeah, I would say probably my next move, maybe my biggest mistake of like not just the game, maybe even like the whole tournament from like a strategic point of view. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll change my mind as I revisit some of these other games. Like f4 actually really surprised me because like, I don't know, I didn't like prepare the position super deeply where I'm just like aware of what to do on like every single move, right? But like a lot of the games I looked at, I didn't remember like any game where white played f4, but when it showed up on the board, it suddenly looked like so logical. Like, yeah, wow, like this move looks really strong. Like this is just absolutely killing me. And I thought for a little while and ended up going f6, which I mainly played just because I felt like it was in the spirit of the position. Like black's idea here is like just to kind of keep the king side under control, play for counterplay on the queen side, try to open up the queen side first, and then once things are shaking, maybe at some point going like f5 or f6 if white has like played g5, then f6 at some point could break open the king side. So when white plays f4, yeah, my first instinct was like, okay, let's just like keep the tension, f6. You know, if white takes, we'll recapture. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. If f5, we'll just ignore it. Like we can go rook g8 and then maybe take on f5 at some point. Maybe go g5 if we absolutely have to. And then look for our chances on the queen side. Somehow I just like wasn't too worried about this one. But yeah, I definitely don't think it was the right move. Now white starts with a4. I think should have just played f5 immediately here. Just immediately take the space. And then okay, white I think is much better, but he goes a4, and this kind of gives me a chance, I don't know, to at least get some counterplay. But I end up making another mistake. Actually, you know, f6 was bad, but my next move is also really bad, but for a different reason. I end up going knight a6 here, and this move is bad just because it's a tactical blunder. Because on b5, my thought was to go knight c5, and then I realized, you know, only in this position that on knight c5 white has takes in d6, and oops, the bishop is lost. I can try bishop e6 to be a little bit tricky, but there's just like simple move rook d1, and again the pawn is lost, or the bishop is lost, so game over. So f6, I would say definitely kind of like a strategic mistake. Knight a6, more of a tactical mistake because it's just based on, yeah, huge miscalculation. And then on b5, I'm forced to go back knight c7, and now I just lost like 2 full moves and then the position. And then here he finally goes f5, and now I'm just like completely, I think it's completely lost already. It just now white just has way too much space. So yeah, in the game I was really kicking myself because I wanted to play rook c8. And I think after this move, honestly, it's still a very playable position because the idea is to play knight a6, and then if b5, then okay, I do get the c5 square. That would be quite nice. So for example, f5, knight a6, and yeah, if this one knight c5, then I think black is probably just fine because the queen is getting in, and there's ideas like bishop d8 and improving the bishop, and yeah, now I actually have, you know, some room on the queen side. We're not really getting mated on the king side, at least not yet. And if white goes like rook b1, trying to keep the knight passive, well then we have like rook c4, and yeah, again like b5, knight c5. I think black is doing quite okay in terms of the counterplay. So that was a real shame because in the game I was kind of choosing between two moves. I was like, should I play rook c8 first or knight a6 first? Like both looked fine to me. Like I was expecting knight a6, rook b1, and then I would go rook c8 and play for this one. And yeah, I don't know. I pretty much flipped a coin in my head and ended up playing knight a6 first. And yeah, unfortunately, just kind of totally blundered this one. So going back, instead of f6, of course, this was my main question after the game. Like, well, what should I have done instead? Actually, just taking on f4 is the right approach. And this was really interesting to me because it's not a move I considered during the game at all. Maybe for half a second, and then I thought okay, queen d4 check, bishop d4, all three of white's pieces can now use the d4 square, and this just looked very, very scary to me, maybe even just bishop takes f4 and then the knight jumps in. But it's actually really not that simple. Number one, on queen d4, okay, black always has bishop f6, and I'm not getting mated. And if anything, if you consider this position to a normal King's Indian, normally if white is playing f4, with the bishop on h8 or g7, normally black is just snapping e takes f4 in the King's Indian. And lots and lots of positions, if white pushes f4, it's usually a mistake in many cases because black takes ef4, you open up the dark squared bishop, you open up the e5 square, especially in a Benoni type of structure, this might kind of resemble. F4 is often a strategic no-no. Or even if white does play it, okay, black just takes on f4 and it's just an automatic move. But in this position, I just didn't even consider it. I was like, wow, ef4, it looks scary to me, and yeah, I mean, I basically just kind of glossed over it. But it's absolutely the right move, and there's not even one way that black has to follow up. I think rook c8 is fine here. Knight e8 is an interesting way to start maneuvering around, because this knight can support the bishop. It also opens up the rook on the c-file. And it's actually very double-edged here because white's king is quite open. And the bishop is coming to f6, and actually black's king is going to be perfectly safe. And then eventually the knight will get out as well. Or even coming back via the c7 square. So that was probably the biggest miss of the game. Of course, this knight a6 was also quite silly. So I think these two mistakes, and then it's already lost. Here after f5, I played queen e8 and knight b1, just very, very nice move. Not the only plan in the position for white, but I think a very effective one. Just planning to bring the knight to c4 and then bringing the queen to b4, targeting the d6 pawn, getting ready to start pushing a5, b6. And it's just a matter of time before white is just breaking through on the queen side. There's just no space for black, just absolutely no space. And so, yeah, to Josiah's credit, I felt like he converted this one extremely well. Rook c8, rook c1, knight e8, knight c4, b6, queen b4. And, yeah, I don't think white has any insane threats yet. But a5 is coming, which felt very, very unpleasant. So I decided to go rook c5 here. To me, this just felt like I'm probably not going to get a better chance to sack the exchange and try to change the situation. So I might as well just do it here. I wasn't even sure if he would take, but okay, if white doesn't take, then rook ac8. I mean, at this point, I feel like strategically black is busted, so you have to try something to change the character of the game. So rook c5, he takes, queen b2, knight d6. And I'm just hoping to kind of construct a dark square blockade, but white is always able to kind of break with a5 here in the long run. So it's really hard to build a fortress here for black. Knight g3 was played. I took on c4, bishop d6, knight f1. Another nice maneuver, bringing the knight to c4. And here I tried a5. I could have also played a6. I'm not really sure. The point is I definitely wanted to get the pawn to a5 without white taking. I figured he would probably take either way, whether I play a6 or if I play a5. So I wasn't really sure which one gives me better chances. There's a chance if I go a6, knight e3, then I can play a5 here. and block the queen side as I wanted. But I thought, I don't know, if I play a6, I'm also maybe threatening to go ab5, and rook a5. So from white's point of view against a6, he's probably going to just take anyway. So I figured let's go a5, and then maybe he won't take, and then I get my get my a5 in. And my hope here, of course, was that if he doesn't take, and then I play g5, and then we just build like a full fortress. I'm pretty sure white has no way of getting in. Like he can put the knight on c4, but I should be in time to kind of defend everything. And yeah, I didn't really see a way for white to break through. Question, was I afraid of any g5? I mean, not while like the king is on f2. You know, I definitely welcome this kind of move if white is not prepared. But okay, if in the future, if white is like, you know, puts the king on a1, puts the rooks on g1 and f1, brings the knight to e3, and then pushes g5, yeah, I mean, I would assume that that's just going to be crushing for white. So by that point, hopefully I've been able to either play g5 myself or figure it out. But long story short, I mean, the position is lost for black, so it's like I don't really have a choice in the matter, right? Like maybe white's winning, maybe white's not. Probably white's winning, but like, you know, it's not really up to me at this point. It's just up to white to find the right plan. So, you know, it's just up to him to figure out what to do. And if g5 happens, it happens. You know, nothing I can really do about it. So on a5, of course, he does take en passant to keep the position more open. Knight e3. And I decided to play g5 here. I mean, this a-pawn was hanging. I could have played bishop takes a4, but the problem was, I don't know what exactly white had in mind, but what I didn't like was that he can go rook a1 here, b5. And okay, feels like my bishops are pretty strong, but then just like rook takes a4, just give back the exchange, but get some position that looks like this. So even this position where I've won my exchange back, to me looked hopeless. Because I have like huge back rank issues with my king. Obviously the knight is much better than the bishop. The queen is super active. The d-pawn is, you know, protected passer. It's like so many positional advantages for white in just one position here. So I felt like even this was just completely lost. And white has other options as well. Like maybe he can even take right away and take on b6. This is also probably extremely dangerous for black, or like rook takes e4, rook a1 for example, and then yeah, the heavy pieces are just coming in. So yeah, end up going g5, just trying to, I don't know, keep some kind of fortress, but yeah, it really just doesn't hold. Queen e2, hitting this one, queen f8, rook to b1, and here I play queen takes h6. Now interestingly enough, I think the engine was saying maybe I could have taken on a4 in this position. And I think, again, I was worried about rook a1. Then black does have bishop b5. Let's say rook takes a6, bishop takes a6. And yeah, this one maybe not so easy for white, even though like I'm getting the exchange back and white is still going to be much, much better. But yeah, maybe not as easy for white here. But I don't think I really notice this move bishop b5. At this point, I think I'm also like approaching time trouble, so it's really getting tough. But this was maybe the last chance for black. Stockfish gives a very nice win, but I'm not sure if my opponent really had this one in mind. White can go rook takes c5 here, hitting this rook on a6, but then bishop takes, queen takes a6, bishop takes e3, and if white goes king takes e3, queen c5 check, black is getting a lot of counterplay, a lot of checks against the king. But the main point for white is that they can just like avoid the counterplay by not taking the bishop, king f3. But this doesn't feel very logical, I would say, for a human to find, but I think it is kind of a cool idea because, again, this h6 pawn is just super annoying. Of course, the bishop is hanging on a4. And just for example, after b5, let's say white plays rook h1, just defending the pawn. This is a very difficult position for black, and I think it's just lost. Despite me having the two bishops, the problem is my queen unfortunately has to stay passive defending the king. White has this very strong d-pawn. Of course, white has a very strong queen as well. This bishop was hanging, but again, there's these tactics. But at some point, the bishop will be hanging, and yeah, the rook can try to get back in. Anyway, I just thought it was an interesting line. I don't know if white would have found that necessarily, but probably bishop takes a4. This would have been black's last chance. In the game, I end up taking on h6. Rook c1 is played. And this move kind of has two intentions, like bringing the rook to the h-file and opening up the knight, and of course hitting this one as well. But okay, mainly getting the knight to c4. And yeah, now everything just kind of collapses here. I took on a4, rook h1. Of course, I could have thrown in this check, but then there's no follow-up, unfortunately, just king g2, and whoops, my queen is going to be in trouble. So rook a4, rook h1, queen f8, knight c4. And yeah, now everything is just collapsing here. If b5, there's knight b6, importantly, and then white takes on d7 and takes on b5. And yeah, basically, I just have too many weaknesses in the position, but yeah, it's not really going to hold. I have a nice blockade, but white has too many ways of getting the heavy pieces in. So yeah, at this point, I'm not really sure if black has any chances whatsoever, and the game pretty much concluded without too much of a struggle from here. I finally got h5 in, d6, takes, check, here, takes, and now black is losing the bishop on e8. So white's now full rook ahead. I get one check in, queen d4, but king g2, and now there's no more checks, and white is ready to mate next move. So I had to resign here. So yeah, I mean, really tough game. I felt like I played pretty badly in this one. I mainly chalked it up to kind of like not really understanding the middle game, especially not understanding that, you know, if white goes f4, I just have to take in this kind of position and then play on the diagonal. And yeah, after pretty much two moves, f6 and knight a6, it was just over. So yeah, kind of unfortunate, but sometimes this happens. Question: have I considered moving off of the kid in these norm tournaments? Yeah, I've considered it for sure. But I don't know. Right now, I think it's kind of my main opening. I mean, in this first tournament, I ended up scoring 2 out of 3 with the King's Indian, so definitely not a bad score with an opening as black. And the second one, I think it was less successful. I think it was half out of 2, if I remember correctly. But one of those games, okay, definitely could have gone either way. So it could have been 1.5 out of 2 as well. Yeah, this h6 pawn definitely was very strong in the end. And yeah, in general, that's kind of one of the nice things about this pawn, is that it just creates these like long-term annoyances on the back rank if the heavy pieces don't come off. But that said, if I could play this position again, I think I would definitely be happy to enter it. I don't know. To me, I really do kind of believe in black's chances here. So, but yeah, that's just me.